I saw it on Linden Street.
Hello, and welcome to I Saw It on Linden Street, the show dedicated to the joy of finding an appreciation in cult films, exploitation oddities, beloved classics, and all points in between. I'm your host, Chris Roberts, inviting you to join us here at the Linden Street Cinema Experience Theater as we once again dig up a fun, cinematic relic from the past. If you're new to the show, thank you so much for joining us. Now, this isn't your standard film review. This is a synopsis of a film that we feel deserves to have another inspection. Maybe a little bit of background thrown in on the actors, information on the director, and hey, if I'm doing my job, you might get a half-amusing story out of me. Fair be warned, while we don't cover all aspects of the plot, we do discuss endings and spoilers. So, if you'd like to be, quote, surprised, please give the film a viewing before you listen to us. If you like us, and I would hope that you do, please recommend this podcast to a friend, give us a favorable review, subscribe. So, hey, here we are in June, and we're here to continue our theme of Blame Canada. That's our curated selection of some of the most underrated and overlooked Canucksploitation classics that we could find on film. So this week, we delve into some grade A cheese with the logic-defying cult classic 1987's Blue Monkey. Join us! You know, one thing that I think that the youth of today are not truly going to get to experience properly ever again is the semi-painful process of picking a film at random from a video store. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm really not at this early juncture trying to throw in an old man Chris moment. But I have to tell you, the stakes are arguably much lower now than they were before. Now, I know you are almost paralyzed by the bounty of choice that we currently all share with the wide variety of streaming services and the recordable playback options, plus when you throw in video on demand, man, you have so many things to pick. But back in the day, when you were picking out something to rent, if you didn't like it, you still had the damn thing at your house. You couldn't just back out of it and select a new film if the first few minutes didn't suck you in or hold your attention. No, instead, you either turned it off or you soldiered on and ate the $250 cost for the rental. At best, you would try to glean an ounce of positive experience from it, but that was up to you and your mental abilities. I guess what I'm trying to intimate to everyone is we are really spoiled right now, and we need to at least acknowledge it. I would spend hours walking the shelves of video stores. Not so much that I was actually afraid of making a bad choice. Hell, I did that all the time. No, what I didn't want to do was miss the potential that there was something amazing just one aisle over. And so, I would continue to walk the shelves, looking for things that would catch my eye. And when I was in high school, that meant a lot of time spent in the horror and sci-fi sections of our local video store. And by local video store, I unfortunately mean Blockbuster Video. Sidebar. Hey kids, listen up. These were the unfortunate days when VHS purging would occur. You see, stores like Blockbuster would get rid of a bunch of older titles, cult films, to make sure that they had shelf space for new releases. And so you would periodically get these culls that would happen so that they would have one giant wall dedicated to fantastic films. You know, films like Mercury Rising with Bruce Willis and Alec Baldwin. We gotta have 100 of these bastards on the wall because everybody's gonna want to see it. What? We need to make more room? Alright. No one's gonna want to see this copy of Eating Raoul. Or, what do you got there in your hand? Bob Balaban's Parents? Throw that shit away. Where else are we going to have to put 80 copies of Snake Eyes with Nick Cage? I so wish I was being facetious right now. But perfectly good, solid movies that are cult films were thrown away to make room for, quote, new releases of films that nobody watched. On one such Friday night, I was looking for something to rent, to then take back to my girlfriend's house. Oh, that was the other thing. See, I would always rent something for me. That would be the thing I would watch later when I would go home. But I would rent something that was to be for us, me and my girlfriend at the time. But it would always be something fun or dumb. So she's never going to sit through like Scarface. So I'll rent that for me. But she'll sit through something dumb and fun like Critters. So I was always on the lookout for something that had the potential to be entertaining, but would be at least considered viewing fun for both of us. As I was strolling down the aisle, letting the VHS artwork try to lure me in, I ended up stopping by a bunch of rough-looking RCA video box artwork. I then saw the film we're going to screen this week. It looked like it had some miles on it. It looked like it had been rented a lot. It had a bunch of very 80s looking nurses running away from some giant big bug and some shock style lettering simply stating the title as Blue Monkey. What the hell was this? I picked up the VHS, I read the back description. Bug bite, extreme illness, parasite emerging, hospital on lockdown, mutated insect, battle for survival? This sounds like a perfect movie to take back to watch on a date and sit through. Sold! First and foremost, let's get down to brass tacks. This is a William Fruitt joint right here. He's the Canadian filmmaker who was responsible for many a low-budget rental mainstay, and the 1980s were indeed his horror heyday, seeing him pump out a bunch of films. Films like Trapped with Henry Silva, Spasms with Oliver Reed and Peter Fonda, Bedroom Eyes with actually nobody of note, and of course Killer Party that had Paul Bartel. All of them uniquely Canadian, all of them horror films. Fruitt himself was born in Lethbridge, Alberta, and he fancied himself an actor, at least after starring in a couple low-budget films, but he decided he would rather be behind the camera, so he came to good old America to study film at UCLA. He got into making Canucksploitation horror films, and truthfully, he never looked back. Now, unfortunately, this film is the last of his main feature films that he would actually work on, because after Blue Monkey, Fruitt ended up becoming a respected gun-for-hire director, working very steadily directing TV shows, and nothing to sneeze at there. He did Alfred Hitchcock Presents, War of the Worlds, The Outer Limits, Goosebumps, Poltergeist, The Legacy. The man has craft skill. Blue Monkey, which is the most official name of the 4 titles this film can be found under. The others were Green Monkey, Insect, and Invasion of the Bloodsuckers. The last one totally confuses me. There is no blood-sucking going on in this picture. Blue Monkey was written by George Goldsmith, and it's hard to tell if it was intentionally written in such a ham-fisted way to allow it to be a spoof, or if it was just full of so much excitement and wanting to get right to the monster insect that good old George just didn't want to bog the audience down with small details like plot or character development. Oh, if you're wondering, it's not about any sort of actual simian-related content. One of the kids in the film ends up opining about having a bad dream of being in the lower-level tunnels, and basically talks about having a nightmare where they were going to find a big evil blue monkey. And based on that weird throwaway line, that's where the film's title comes from. Yeah, that's not a great sign. But still, this stands out as sort of a send-up to the giant insect films of the 1950s, and there's a good amount of cribbing from Ridley Scott's Alien, as well as a good amount of junk science worked in to allow for all kinds of very convenient ways to solve the plot problem. While Pruitt may have been known for pumping out schlock, albeit fun and very competent schlock, he at least had his eyes on the prize when it came to casting this film. This film is actually groaning with talent. You got your tentpole, quote, big star here with the inclusion of Steve Railsback. You may remember him from us covering him in episode 42. That's where he was falling around a naked Matilda May all over London in the vampire epic Life Force. He's your big leading man name here, and he goes through this film looking kind of bored, playing Detective Jim Bishop, a cop who ends up just being sort of around to help defend the hospital against some giant bugs. For his romantic foil, well, that would be Gwyneth Walsh. She's filling in the role of Dr. Carson. Her claim to fame was being one of the two evil Duras sisters that starred in 1994's Star Trek Generations. So, yeah, good times. Backing the two of them up, you have Susan Anspach, who plays Dr. Glass, Dr. Carson's partner on call at the hospital, who is desperate just to treat some people during this outbreak. You can then throw in the very competent work of the late, great Canadian character actor John Vernon, or as most of us know him, Dean Wormer of National Lampoon's Animal House. He is, of course, fantastic here as Roger Levering, the awkward and self-absorbed hospital director that just wants things to get back to normal. Normally this is the spot where I would do like a deep dive on John Vernon, but in this case I'm kind of behind the eight ball here, so I'm going to save a full character retrospective for another day, but John Vernon is definitely an actor who deserves our kudos. He has been in some amazing films, and we are better for it. Now, here is where the movie really could have doubled down on amping up the intentional fun, at least especially where a Canadian film is concerned. You see, they have the marvelous inclusion of Second City alumnus Don Lake. He's one of those guys, if you saw him, you'd know him. He's a frequent collaborator with Christopher Guest movies. He's the councilman in Waiting for Guffman. He's here in a role of entomologist Elliot Jacobs. I should say Dr. Elliot Jacobs. And then backing him up, you have two other Second City and SCTV players, the great Joe Flaherty and the wonderful Robin Duke, portraying a bickering pregnant couple trapped in the hospital during a lockdown. Seriously, y'all, you had a movie that had Count Floyd himself, and you didn't properly use him? What the hell? Rounding it all out, there's this little cute as a button, Sarah Polley, age 8. Now, for those of you who know Sarah Polley, you're thinking of her as the competent filmmaker actress that she is nowadays, but in 1987, that was a huge year for young Sarah Polley. You see, she was just starring in 4 films that came out that year, plus she was in an episode of the series Friday the 13th before she ended up snagging what we would consider her 2 big gets as a child actor. She appeared in Sally Salt in Terry Gilliam's The Adventure of Baron Munchausen. That's going to be a future episode. Baron Munchausen is one of the interesting, if not terrifying, childhood films of mine. And she was the original Ramona Quimby from 1988 to 1989 in the television series that limited the coverage of the Beverly Cleary classic character. All that before, again, growing up to become the fantastic actress and filmmaker we know her as today. This film was produced, again, through Telepictures and financing, which I must point out, while this film was not a hit, it is interesting to see what a few years have done, especially when you compare it to the public outrage of having a film, a horror film, as we've previously discussed with Shivers, made using public money. Nobody went out in the street and rioted over Blue Monkey. Nobody cared. I mean, I guess, you could say it was interesting. I don't know. But, I mean, it just was what it was. Nobody seemed to see it, but nobody seemed to be opposed to it either. It's an interesting note. Hey, I guess I could wax on more about this, but I'll be fair. You've been very patient with me as I flap my gums about the Blue Monkey. So how about we just put this all to bed and we get to that trailer.
At 7 p.m., County Memorial Hospital was placed under a Class 4 quarantine alert.
I've never seen any strain of bacteria with a configuration like this.
It's not what's gotten into their patients that worries them. It's what's getting out.
Oh my God. It's one of a kind. I gotta get closer.
The entrances are completely sealed.
It's really happening?
Something big.
No one is permitted in or out until further notice.
Friday night. It's always like this.
Hurry, the little bugger's on its way!
The male paralyzes the victim by stinging. When those eggs hatch, you're gonna have a lot of hungry larvae.
Oh my God, they're still alive.
Trying to break into the hospital from below. Go on, move, go, get out of here!
The Blue Monkey's coming!
I said fire!
The Blue Monkey is coming.
David Jordan, what are you doing here? Let's give him a boost.
And coming.
We still have a few bugs to iron out.
And still coming. Blue Monkey.
Handyman Fred Adams stops by the widow Marwella Hobson's place to help her with a couple of her light fixtures, and, hey, he asks the lady out on a date. She's very pleased to do so, and as they walk through her greenhouse, she proudly shows off her newest plant, one that came off of a small volcanic island off the coast of Micronesia, which I have to say could be one of 1,000 small islands, but hey, we'll let that slide. Well, when old Fred reaches out to touch the flower, he seemingly pricks himself on something sharp, except the plant has no known thorns. Fred says he's fine, though, and as he exits to his car, he ends up collapsing, causing Marwella to have to call the paramedics and rush him to the local hospital. Looks like their date's gonna be postponed. There's a lot of hubbub going on at the Hill Valley Hospital that afternoon. While Fred is indeed a priority, there is a cop there. One detective, Jim Bishop, is played by Steve Railsback, who ends up bursting through the ER and screaming for any attending physician, at least the ones within his voice. That would be Dr. Rachel Carlson, is played by Walsh, and Dr. Judith Glass is played by Ansbach, to help him. You see, his partner has been shot. All the focus shifts to the wounded officer, as it should be. That is, until a horrific, disgusting pupa begins to emerge from the feverish Fred's mouth. Horrified but fascinated, the doctors and the cop end up crowding around him, and they extract said pupa and put it into a jar, sending it down to the lab, noting that since its exit, Fred seems to at least have his symptoms go away. His high fever has dropped. His breathing has resumed to a normal capacity. Worried about the potential for a contamination, and of course worrying about parasites, Dr. Carson orders a mandatory checkup for everyone who is in the vicinity, and that ends up including Officer Bishop, to make sure that no further infections will occur. That being said, Dr. Carson decides to take Detective Bishop on a small tour of their facilities.
I never would have known this place was a hospital.
We try to keep up on all the modern conveniences here. It's not often that we get a gunshot victim at the county memorial, though they'll be talking about this day for a long time.
Is he gonna make it?
He's got our best surgeons working on him. We may look a little old-fashioned from the outside, but inside we're pretty up-to-date.
Well, could have fooled me.
Used to be an insane asylum. That's ancient history. How'd you like to take a look at the future? Come on. Our new laser research lab. We've just installed the Exxon laser. In a couple of days, we'll have the ND-YAG operational. We'll be involved in molecular breakdown experiments for DNA and RN and... Oh, great. Come on, I want you to take a look at this.
Good guard. Officers. Stand by. Let's pick it up. Going up 2.3. Take it slow. Going up. Good. Let's go to full capacity. Hey, coordinates aren't holding. What do you mean the coordinates aren't holding? They're not holding. What's happened? Why not?
We still have a few bugs to iron out.
Dr. Carson takes Jim for a tour of their facility and points out their state-of-the-art genetics lab, as well as pointing out their newest boondoggle, the laser laboratory that will supposedly help them with gene sequencing for some reason. While they're out there chatting, they end up swinging by the lab where other doctors are attempting to analyze the pupa. Carson and Bishop watch as they're unable to properly identify the insect through X-raying and decide to open the pupa up themselves, revealing a nasty and aggressive insect that flies around the room attacking. That is, until Bishop, helping, gets it contained in a specimen beaker. Back in the ER, Fred suddenly begins to flatline.
Paramedic's temperature is leveled at 102. Pulse at 140. Not nearly as bad as poor old Fred here. His bones are dissolving and flooding his circulatory system. I wish some of this made sense. Well, at least Marwella and the paramedic are stabilizing. That's something, I guess. Damn it!
Fred ends up exploding when Dr. Glass attempts to revive him with shock paddles, further contaminating the scene. Worse, Marwella and the other paramedics who brought Fred in are now experiencing the same symptoms that he was before the insects emerged. Worried they're dealing with a full-scale pandemic, Dr. Carson argues with hospital director Levering, as played by John Vernon, that they have to quickly lock down the facility and contact the authorities until they at least know what they're truly dealing with. He is not in favor, but Dr. Carson overrules him for the sake of saving the hospital.
Judith, what the hell's going on here?
We're not exactly sure, Roger.
Not sure? At this time, the hospital can't afford to be not sure.
Well, there's a differential diagnosis a mile long. Anywhere from infectious bacteria to viruses to a parasite. I think we should alert the LIDC.
The LIDC? Is that really necessary?
The LIDC?
Lincoln Institute for Disease Control in New York.
Well, don't you think we're overreacting? I mean, an old man develops a high fever from an insect bite. Seems a little drastic to bring them into it. Huh?
Roger, what you're really saying is you don't want any negative publicity, right? Not with a new laser wing opening in a week.
I resent that, Judith. The safety and care of our patients has and always will be the first concern of our county memorial hospital.
Good. Then we'll contact the Institute immediately. Alice, would you gather all your important data and get it over to the clinic immediately, please?
All right. But I still want this matter cleaned up as quickly and as quietly as possible.
As a form of compromise, Dr. Glass agrees that she will call entomologist Dr. Elliot Jacobs, as played by Don Lake, to help them identify what kind of insect they are dealing with here, and to see if they can use him to help understand just what disease seems to be spreading so rapidly amongst their patients. When two of the lab technicians end up excusing themselves from the genetics lab where the insect is being contained to sneak off to have a tryst, a foursome of wandering child patients from the cancer ward end up sneaking in and think the insect under the glass is, quote, cute. They end up deducing that it must indeed be hungry, and so they grab what looks to be food, which is in reality genetic growth promoter. They then end up feeding the little bugger, that is, until they end up knocking over a vial and flee the scene for fear of getting in trouble. Now, apparently this stuff causes a growth so rapid that by the time our lab technicians return for some post-coital genetic testing, they encounter a hungry 12-foot-tall praying mantis-like creature, one who promptly devours them and ends up going on a rampage towards the hospital basement. Dr. Jacobs arrives, and both he, Dr. Carson, and Bishop get to see just what's left of the lab. And, more importantly, of the technicians. It would seem that the creature eats bones of its victims for sustenance, because, you know, good writing. And now that they know, it's going to eat its way through a few more staff and set up shop in the utility tunnels underneath the hospital, where it's nice and warm. Oh, did I mention that the hospital was built on an old abandoned sanitarium? Yeah, there's a whole wing where it's just locked off and creepy tunnels. Yeah, used to be a sanitarium back in the day. Lots of space for a bone-hungry bug to hide. And that promptly sets up a nest where the creature starts laying eggs. It cuts off the power supply too in its efforts. Before you know it, a second bug ends up hatching at this point, and because it's female, the worry is they're going to start breeding. Jacobs ends up speculating that it's going to grow to maturation within a few hours, and it's going to be soon able to produce 500 eggs or more. They have to stop it. Unfortunately for everybody involved, the military has finally arrived. You see, Dr. Glass's warning, done through good intentions, of course, has summoned the authorities to begin to lock off the contagion and keep it from spreading to the outside community. With the power cut off, the staff in the hospital have no way to tell the outside world what exactly is going on, and letting them know they actually have a bigger problem here, before they are completely barricaded in by the government officials. Good director Levering ends up trying to have a chat with some GIs, only to be turned away at the front of his own hospital.
Judith, what are you doing?
Well, we have 2 more cases, and the staff refuses to go in the isolation ward.
You're not going in there.
Oh, no. Who else is?
But you mustn't. You can't. What if you became... Judith, please.
Roger, What choice do I have, huh?
Mr. Levering, you've got to come with me right away. How does it know? You've got to come, sir.
Department of Public Health. Please, stay right where you are, sir.
Well, what are you doing here?
Sir, the Lincoln Institute of Disease Control has alerted us that County Memorial has been exposed to a highly dangerous and extremely contagious bacteria, unlike anything we've ever encountered. Now, until we can find the strain and formulate a plan to combat it, this entire hospital is under complete quarantine. A Class 4 is in effect. This is our authorization from the governor.
The doctors, Bishop, and Levering all regroup to take stock of the situation. They're stuck inside, but they now know that they have to stop the bugs before they further multiply. Bishop ends up talking to the kids, and he finds out that during their nighttime perambulations, they've been exploring those old sections of the hospital, and know how to get down into those steam tunnels where the bugs have gone. Dr. Carson and Dr. Jacobs want to come up with a plan that will allow Bishop to infiltrate the nest and kill the female and the eggs, hopefully sparing the male, so they'll at least have him alive so they can possibly come up with a cure for the disease. Bishop is, in general, uneasy about all of this, but he agrees, heading down into the tunnels armed with butane tanks and a flare. He does manage to torch the female and the nest, but the male is completely now at large and angry.
Hi, Dr. Clare. We thought that you could use some help.
And some cheering up.
You two are a fine pair. The whole hospital's going nuts, and you managed to get yourself shit-faced.
Ain't it the truth?
Go to bed, Marwella, please.
No, I feel fine. You're the one that's dead tired and needs to get some rest. Is there something wrong?
How come you're so damn healthy when everybody else is half dead?
I don't know. I have the foggiest idea. Excuse me.
You see, during this time, Marwella and her blind friend Dee Dee have been partaking of a secreted bottle of bourbon, and they've been wandering the hallways, enjoying themselves, drunk as skunks, laughing. Dr. Glass is actually disgusted by them. That is until she realizes that Marwella looks fantastic. She's not running a fever like the others. She's no longer pallid. She discovers that alcohol seemingly neutralizes the toxins given off by the mantis. They can cure the illness and they can stop the pandemic using alcohol. There's just one minor problem. You see, now that the nest is burned, the male has gone on an open rampage throughout the dark hospital hallways, noshing on nurses and injuring the infirmed. Joey, one of the kids who had helped Bishop find his way down to the nest, does attempt to warn folks that the actual bug is coming, but they ignore the little boy. When Bishop arrives, patients and staff members are just seemingly walking about, milling in the lobby, and he begs them to get back to their rooms and hide. Bishop ends up being left alone to confront the creature in a long hallway, firing his service pistol at it, not really doing any damage and seemingly angering it further. The bug chases Bishop, smelling its former mate on him, tracking him throughout the hospital, and does almost kill him. But Dr. Jacobs arrives and is able to distract the mantis with a recording of the bug's mating call. They end up leading it down towards the laser lab, where it charges Elliot and knocks him from the upper catwalk, breaking his leg. Bishop catches up with Dr. Carson and Dr. Jacobs and attempts to help them, but he only further enrages the bug. Doc Carson ends up taking the laser out of its housing unit and shoots the creature a few times, injuring it but not doing any real damage, and is forced to run herself as it sets its full attention upon her. It's up to Bishop to pick up the laser and cut into the beast's eyes, eventually breaking through its carapace, killing it. Things end up going back to normal. Jim's partner makes a full recovery, and once he's out of surgery, he thanks him for everything he's done. All of the exposed people have gotten good and lubed up with some good old gut rot alcohol, and things are looking like they're going to be all right going forward. Bishop, Carson, and Jacobs all bid each other a fond farewell, at least until Bishop gets Carson alone and asks her if she would like to join him for a nice quiet breakfast sometime soon, and she happily agrees. We are thinking it's all going to be fine, and hey, the movie starts to fade to black. But just then, a manic number of zooming camera shots pan through the lower hallways of the hospital and reveal previously undiscovered eggs that are now starting to hatch. It looks like this story isn't over at all. Fade to black on a music sting. Look, this is by no way a good movie, but it's a fun one. But it's one that has a lot of small problems. Problems that are compounded into larger ones that end up making it feel even cheesier than it probably ought to be. The concept that this hospital looks like it's just one good push away from falling down entirely. It's a half step above being condemned. Couple that with the fact that it's also supposedly built over and around a now abandoned sanitarium, and that it now, for some reason, supposedly boasts a complete experimental genetics lab with a state-of-the-art laser? That's just sort of a bridge too far. Considering that the front of the hospital and the ER essentially looks like it's the lobby of a bus station and it has the same sensibilities, this sort of feels like we're just sort of free associating when we came to creating a script, and we were, at best, lucky to have it end the way it did. Instead of some sort of arbitrary, oh no, now there's werewolves here. You know, one of those twists that just doesn't pay off. Now, I have to say, I'm a lover of bad films. I feel like this film itself is sort of a wasted opportunity. With a little tweaking, I actually feel that Blue Monkey could have been a fantastic, intentional horror comedy. If the comedians involved were actually allowed to have fun and not play it straight, and you still let the regular character actors dial it back and just be straight characters in a horror movie, I think you would have had something that could have been both gruesome and fun. The bug itself wouldn't have known it was in a comedy. You would have still had a deadly threat, but the people involved would have been reacting differently, so it would have made for a far better film. That's where this film would have been funny. It's almost always as if it's trying to be a real film. Here, let me backtrack. Case in point, alcohol as the cure to the transmission of the disease. That's a really great concept that could have been comedic gold. And what if all of your main characters had to get liquored up to keep the disease at bay while they still are forced to fight a giant bug that's stalking them? You know, drunk. Seriously. That's a funny situation. And a serious threat in a funny situation, especially when you have all this SCTV talent. that could have been something that would have been amazing to watch. Now, don't worry, that concept would eventually come to pass. It would just take another quarter century. You see, in 2012, there's an Irish horror comedy called Grabbers, directed by John Wright, that did just that. It's got these alien creatures that invade a small town, and they're injured by alcohol, and they won't attack people who themselves are drunk. And it's a solid little B comedy horror movie. Seriously, if you're looking for something fun, totally recommend it. But no matter. I mean, I guess this basically paints that Homer Simpson was, of course, right once again.
To alcohol, the cause of and solution to all of life's problems.
Look, one thing that does bother me about this film, not that I want them to be punished cosmically or karmically anything, it's just that the goddamn kids in this film are the cause of all of this suffering, and truly, they're little terrors. Sarah Polly's Ellen and Stuart Stone's Joey, they're just a bunch of pint-sized terrorists here. Okay, I get it. They're supposed to be kids with leukemia at the hospital, and they're there for treatment, so this is their new home for the time being. It's just that every time we see them, they're wandering the halls, they're getting involved, and causing mischief for all the hospital staff. When they're told to go back to their rooms, stay out of trouble, they instead take off like a little pack of jackals, and they end up wandering out into the air ducts. They are the ones who end up feeding the bug the growth chemicals. They're the ones who only know how to get down to the basement, but they don't reveal that until it's far too late in the storyline. Instead of leaving when the scene is secured and as he is instructed, Joey decides to stay and watch Bishop set fire to the nest, and he almost gets them both killed when Bishop is forced to pick him up and carry him away from the enraged male bug. But hey, perhaps you should know that these kids are trouble. After all, the first thing Joey wants to do when he meets Bishop is, hey, let me play with your gun.
Is that a real gun?
You bet.
Can I see it? Let's see this.
Not right now, son.
Are you a private eye like Magnum?
No, I'm a detective, kind of like Kojak.
Who?
For your time, kid.
Why are you in the hospital?
My partner's been shot. What are you in for?
Leukemia.
Alright, let's talk about some positives of the film. Railsback might be sort of sleepwalking here through his role, but he's serviceable. I have to say, the props really go to both Walsh and Ansbach, who certainly do far more to carry the plot forward and make real decisions as to what to actually do. Now, I'm not going to say this is your perfect example of a feminist film, because it's not. But you do have two competent, strong female doctor leads who spend the film trying to figure out what's going on, while most of the men instead run around in the air ducts of an old abandoned tunnel system. Does this technically mean it passes the Bechdel test? No, I actually don't think it qualifies. There's not enough conversation going on to have that happen. Now, the flip side is, do I particularly care? Not really, no. So, enough said. You can glean what you want from it. Let's instead talk about the mantis. Now, I'll admit I've been calling the bug a mantis this entire time, for the most part because it seems to be modeled specifically after one, at least as far as general profiles go for the look. While there are indeed many versatile and different species, and a myriad of amazing things mantises can do, this creature comes off as nigh indestructible, and it does a bunch of stuff that real mantises just can't do.
How long before those eggs hatch?
Well, the eggs will be full grown and reproducing within days. The potential for a fertile pair of insects could theoretically reach 100 million in a year. We have to kill the female and destroy the eggs.
What about the male?
Oh, it's not that simple. Insects aren't like humans or animals. They're 80% liquids and muscles. They have very few organs. You could cut off a leg, even destroy the brain, and they'll just grow a new one back. Their sense of smell is so strong they can detect something miles away. That thing's outer shell is like armored plating. So conventional weapons are useless against it. But the fact that the male protected the female during its metamorphosis indicates that she's very vulnerable.
What's the best way to do it?
An incendiary attack will be the most practical.
Do you have any butane tanks in this hospital?
This building's over 100 years old. You start a fire in here, the whole place could go up in minutes. It's out of the question.
I don't really think we have a choice.
When those eggs hatch, you're going to have a lot of hungry larvae. They're mineral devourers. The male paralyzes the victim by stinging.
Like a spider.
The female deposits the eggs in a manner that the hatched larva can feed on the food until its metamorphosis is complete. The victim would be alive for several days. It'd be an extremely painful death.
There are some butane tanks in storage.
Okay, that's a start.
So did you get all that? It can reproduce asexually. It needs to eat minerals. It's going to crunch on your bones. Oh, and by the way, it's going to sting you with some sort of unseen paralytic. It'll also cocoon you for later consumption. It's also very fast. Did I mention the carapace has more armor plating and that Bishop's handgun is going to be rendered useless? If this film had gone on for another hour, I'm sure we would have learned that the ovipositor that we see laying the eggs has its own Roth IRA built into it. Oh, but hey, don't worry, butane, that'll blow it up. Lasers too. But hey, I gotta give credit where credit is due. The use of smoke and darkness to mask what, in close-up shots, looks to be a very rubbery bug suit/puppet combo does actually work here for this film, and there are indeed some great mantis grabs from above. Those are enjoyable. So I have to give him props. Fruit wasn't anybody's fool when it came from making his monster look the best it could under the conditions he was operating with. How was this film received? Well, I know this is going to shock you, but like many films that I enjoy, this one was not a smash hit upon its release. When Blue Monkey made its debut on September 25th, 1987, the apropos sound of crickets was heard towards this big bug film. Nobody saw this film. Seriously, I'm not being facetious. If you go on Rotten Tomatoes right now, you will see it only holds a 29% rating, and those are from audience reviews only. There's a major blank spot for actual critics, as not enough people have even taken the time to review the film to give it a scoring. In his retrospective, his movie guide from 2014, Leonard Maltin at least rated this film a bomb, but he didn't take the time to do a complete rundown of it. One of the main surviving reviews that is available to be seen in an archived criticism is from Janet Maslin of the New York Times. In her October 16th review from the same year, it was, in my opinion, rather kind to the film. She states, "A lot of Blue Monkey, which opens today at the Lyric and the Movie Center 5, is also too ordinary, i.e. it's awash with dripping slime, to be of interest to non-aficionados of the genre. But the film's spooky lighting and its ingenious, as is some of its pointedly familiar, dialogue exists." Look, I know that's not a ringing endorsement, but a number of people didn't even bother to see it or to take the time to review it, so you have to go with what you got. Blue Monkey came and ended up going from the Cineplexes and wound up being released to video in the following spring of March of 1988, where it began the slow and steady cult rental that we know it to be today. Now, this film has been posted online by horrornews.net in 2018 as being one of the 7 most unappreciated horror movies you can only find on VHS. But I'm going to have to beg to differ with that. You see, it's because the version of the film we screened here today was the burned-to-order gray market copy of The Blue Monkey, supplied to us by none other than the pirate geniuses of video, the Revic Film Prodigies, otherwise known as Revic.com. You see, Revic has been around for decades. First, they existed as a mail-order VHS trading company that would advertise in old Fangoria magazines. And then later, they would switch to having burn-to-order DVDs for what we consider to be lost and out-of-print films that were not getting released, either on DVD or later Blu-ray. So, what's the catch? Well, it's sort of existing in a world that's somewhere between legalish and illegalish. But I have to say, the prints themselves come from filmmakers who willingly give their films over to be put out to be sold. And therefore, the rights are up for grabs. Hence, what you're seeing here is the online version of what you would find at an old school horror con or comic con where bootleg tape trading would occur. I would argue that until a proper studio picks up the film and releases it, you are actually contributing to keeping Fruit's work and this film alive by ordering a made-to-burn DVD with its custom art, its clean transfer, and its no-fuss copy. It's well worth the cost of $12.99. Now, remember folks, we don't get anything for telling you where to buy your films from. We just here at the LSCE think it's important that you continue to support physical media. And it's these mediums that you want to keep contributing to so that companies will keep releasing the content that we so desperately are looking to see. And at the end of the day, folks, isn't that all you really need? Besides, in this case, Blue Monkey is a weird, lost gem of a film. A classic, good, bad flick that needs to be preserved and to be seen to be believed. So, what do you say? Go out there, get yourself a copy today. You will be better off for it. So that's going to wrap things up here for this episode of I Saw It on Linden Street. Thank you so much for joining us. If you like us, I would hope that you please subscribe and give us a favorable review on your Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to us. Swing by and check out our website at lscep.com, where we have articles, episode links, and comics for you to peruse. We're also featured on Podchaser. That's a podcast database for listeners and creators of podcasts alike. Find us there, give us a follow, and review us if you please. More reviews means we're more searchable, and then we can share with more people. As always, if you'd like to get in touch with us, make a comment, ask a question, send us wonderful things, please reach out to us. Email us at lindenstreetcinemaexperience@gmail.com. If you'd like to be even more personal or wish to contribute to a segment in the sidecar, please send us an audio message by way of Anchor. That's a free and easy app to use. So, until next time, take care out there, everybody. Wash your hands. Please stay healthy. And remember, life's too short not to live in the past. Take it easy out there, everybody.